All right. Greetings, greetings. Peace, everyone. Good evening to you and greetings. This is Chief Yuya, and we are digging into our fifth installment, right, of the 2001 A Space Odyssey breakdown. And as always, please, if you can hear me, please just give me some type of signal in the chat before I start, um, you know, talking too much. And yeah, so just throw me a one, throw your unos up in the air if you don't mind to let me know I can be heard. That would be greatly appreciated. All right. I guess I'll just start going. All right, one. Thank you, Sister Precious. I appreciate it so much. Um, thank you, Sister Maria. I appreciate it so much. All right, so we're gonna get into willfully a couple of things. Well, willfully, you all had an opportunity to click the link that I provided in our last session, right? Which was the mockumentary or documentary, however you want to look at it, depending on your perspective, right? Of Dark Side of the Moon, right? And of course, this is all again related to the very significant film that we looked at, 2001, A Space Odyssey. And of course, this is a film that we've been breaking down all month, really. So we took 1 month just to break down one film. But the truth is, like, there's so many other elements that we could get into and could have gotten into that we didn't even touch upon because it's just that big of a film. It's something that was really meticulously put together, and I think it's always good when you can get a sense of how real art is done. How real art is actually comprised, and how it's always going to be multi-layered when you're doing something like that. So of course we went through some of the pieces with the film, and please feel free to put into the live chat anything that came up. I know last time we spoke, we wanted to look at the use of colors and shapes in the film, and in particular, we wanted to look at colors and shapes on that last scene, the journey to Jupiter, right? And a lot of people saw, which was cool. A lot of you saw different things. Not only did some of you see colors, but you saw like crosses on the windshield. I didn't even ask the brother DL, but Darian, because there's Celtic crosses. I don't know if he saw just regular crosses or if he saw the Celtic crosses, right? Because that's significant to what we're looking at this evening. But you might have noticed some of the shapes were also like different emblems and flags and stuff. But these were not just on that last scene, these were actually on the first scene where we see outer space in the actual movie. If you look at some of the ships that we're seeing, like the shuttles and whatnot, there were actually emblems on the bottom of them, and those emblems, it gets deep, but I'm going to show you how deep it gets. So like I said, if there's anything else you noticed or whatever about the film and you want to throw it into the chat, just feel free. um I'm doing these breakdowns, and then we'll be going back. I think it's Brother Low for the next one. It might not be. I think, or it's either Brother Low or one of the sisters. I'm not sure. But we all have our way of doing things, but I don't want you to think as soon as you see me that it's like a lecture, and you can't really participate. With the breakdowns is different because, again, like I said, things are represented to us all differently. We all see something different. We see colors different. Oh, Brother Low is next. Okay, yeah. So um, we all have our own way, but these are movie breakdowns. These are not movie lectures. Um, but what I wanted to do first, pull up my little notes. I didn't take too many notes, but I just took some just to try to make sure I hit certain things I didn't want to forget to speak about. But first, what I wanted to do, right, before we look at Dark Side of the Moon, and show of hands, because this is important. Because if you didn't look at it, then I'm gonna have to. I'll explain more of it. Who actually clicked the link and watched it? All right, don't try to be cool and like I ain't gonna say I didn't watch it. If you don't say, just say if you didn't watch it, you didn't watch it. But just let me know if anybody who's here actually watched it. And I'm not talking about 2000. And if you're like 2001, yeah, then that means you didn't watch the last segment. All right. So, okay. So it's you and Master Menelex. I already know that's anime. When y'all together, I know it's going to be an anime breakdown. um, but yeah. So who watch? I watched it. Naya. Okay, cool. So Naya YG Gutter. All right. Um, all right, good. So two people out of 21. Peace, brother Mayuba. Yeah, okay. Mr. Precious, brother Low. Okay. So we got a couple people in there on 21. And the more that's going to be coming in. All right. So yeah, I only hope that some more of you watched it. You know what I mean? If not, then it is what it is, right? So but before I get into the documentary and things like that as it relates to 2001, like what I always tell you when you're studying things, whether it's scripture or whatever, who's talking, who's being spoken to, and what's going on at that time, right? These are the things that you always want to look at to make sure that you understand the context of what's being communicated with you. So the first thing I wanted to do, like I think I had shared with you before, Kubrick's films are primarily expressing the same alchemical process, right? Very similar. I think I shared that last time. William Shakespeare, you know, or some might say Sir Francis Bacon, but William Shakespeare, if you read his work, if you read his plays, you realize he's an alchemist, an alchemist, and he's expressing a path. He's expressing a process in each play. So you could look at it and like, oh, Romeo and Juliet, a beautiful love story, or Hamlet, or you know, whatever, Macbeth, and it's you could look at it for the value, the literature value, and the pictures that he's able to create and so forth. But if you study the person who's talking, who's being spoken to, what's going on at that time, then it will give you a little bit more background. All right. So I wanted to address Kubrick for a second, Stanley Kubrick. Now, like as you know, this movie was really generated from The Sentinel, which was written by Arthur C. Clarke. And when this movie was done, The Sentinel and this movie were, I'm sorry, the book 2001 and the Space Odyssey and this movie were pretty much produced at the same time, but they're different. Okay, so it's not like the book came from the movie or the movie came from the book. They're different. Hand, I don't know what that means, sovereignties. Um, so or was that supposed to be an emoji that didn't come out? Um, so I want to get into Kubrick, his films, right? So I'm just going to give you a rundown of the films that he's done, right? And again, remember, they're a process. It's just like musicians. You listen to certain music artists, and what you get is if you really listen, especially in the age of albums. We don't do albums really too much anymore. People do them, but nobody cares about an album anymore. But especially in the age of albums, you had artists that were making a large statement over the course of time. Because sometimes, depending on your deal, like let's say for instance, LL Cool J, when he signed to Def Jam at 18 years old, he signed, I think it was like either a 15 or 20 album deal. So, which was kind of crazy because he had the same deal from 18 years old to I think he was like 50 or somewhere in his 40s or some crazy thing like that, right? The same deal from like 1984, when there were no MP3s or CDs even, you know what I mean? But I'm sure obviously they renegotiated his contract and tightened things up with stuff like that. But the point I'm saying is that when okay, well, I got 15, 20, 30 projects in front of me, let me sit back and think about what do I want to say? what do I want my grand statement to be, right? So that's why I want to share with you Kubrick's actually his films. 1953, he did a film called Fear and Desire. 1955, he did Killer's Kiss. 1956, he did The Killing. We noticing a pattern here? 1957, he did Paths of Glory. And I should add that all of those that I'm speaking about, with the exception of a few, I'll let you know which ones. The answer is no. He wrote all of them, right? So some of the films he co-wrote, some of the films he only directed, and some he wrote and directed. Okay. So again, Fear and Desire, Killer's Kiss, The Killing, Paths of Glory, Spartacus, which is that came out in 1960. Very, very popular film if you ever get a chance. 1957, he did Paths of Glory. 1960, he did Spartacus. 1962, he did Lolita. Lolita was filled with all sorts of occultism, you know. 1964, he did Doctor Strangelove. Very important film. Very important film. Then, of course, in 1968, he did 2001: A Space Odyssey. 1971, he did A Clockwork Orange. 1975, he did Barry Lyndon. 1980, he did The Shining. 1987, he did Full Metal Jacket. And then it wasn't until 12 years later, in 1999, when he did Eyes Wide Shut. That was his last film, right? So, and I'm also sharing this because maybe some of you didn't, you may have seen those films, some of them or heard of them, and didn't know that these were Kubrick films, like Clockwork Orange. Like that's a film everybody has to watch. Like certain films are part of just the library of, especially when you're coming into higher thought or elevated or loftier awareness. There's certain paths that everyone's kind of gonna go down to just to figure some things out or to get some understanding. Like back in the days, um the book, like when you started to really want to get into the understanding of conspiracy, everybody, not everybody, but a lot of people read Behold the Pale Horse. That was a book written by William Cooper, you know. And if you had that book, like if you were sitting somewhere in the park or whatever reading that book, it was like people knew, like, oh, okay, he's kicked it up a notch, or she has kicked it up a notch. That was like back in the days, that was like one of your, it was almost like seeing somebody read Message to the Black Man. It was like, okay, all right, you're kicking it up. So Clockwork Orange was definitely one of those films. That was a kick up film. I would even say Full Metal Jacket. There was a lot to understand and learn about Full Metal Jacket. Yeah, Lo say it's a classic, exactly. It was a lot in Full Metal Jacket to understand the making of a killer, or a soldier, But there was a lot of science in Full Metal Jacket. Doctor Strangelove, deep. Spartacus. I mean, really, Lolita's super deep because Lolita was really dealing with deities. It wasn't just about someone who had had experienced this pedophilic kind of obsession with a young girl. It was deeper than that because Lolita is actually an archetype. But of course Kubrick knew these things. Now I think it's important, and I feel interesting to note. And this session I do with you this evening, right? I want you to share your thoughts. Now, what I mean by share your thoughts, not just your emojis. Emojis are cool, but emojis, they can get annoying sometimes because it's like, what are you talking about? You don't always feel like reading hieroglyphs. That's what emojis are. They're the new hieroglyphs. But so when I say share your thoughts, like we're going to be talking about a lot of different, what we could say conspiracy, or it could be conspiracy or not be conspiracy, right? And if you watch the documentary, you understand. Um, Tell me your thoughts on the things that come for us, like Clockwork Orange. I think it was Sister Maria who said something like it was mind. Yeah, Clockwork Orange was absolutely mind bending. Things like that. Like so as you're getting at certain terms or words, or even if I say Eyes Wide Shut, what comes to mind when you think of that? What are some of the held memories and ideas that you have about some of these films, these pieces of art. So I want you to express. I'm not going to share opinion at all. I rarely do. I like to leave space in the room for other people to share and express their opinions and things like that, right? So what I do think is important, you tell me what you think it means. Tell me what you think this means. um so Stanley Kubrick, like I said, his last film he did was Eyes Wide Shut with Nicole Kidman and Tom Cruise, which was an interesting film for several reasons. But one of the like, oh man, he dropped so many clues. That was like a film you almost had to watch at half speed, because I'm telling you, that film, it was a type where, like, you have to read, like, in the beginning they're talking about a newspaper article where a prostitute is found dead in a room, right? And that right there was your first clue as to what the movie was going to be about, because you have to look at the names, like, if you watch it on a clear enough copy, I'm saying copy, but obviously it's all digital now, you can zoom in and read the article. If you all have probably noticed, a lot of times when I've done movie breakdowns, I'll pull out things in the scene that you may not have seen, because when I'm watching a film, yeah, I'm listening. I want to listen to the score. I'm listening to the music. I'm listening to sound effects. I'm listening. A lot of times, I may watch a couple of times, and then I'll watch with subtitles on, because I might have missed something that was said in the back. And the subtitles sometimes will let you hear, like, maybe there was a telephone conversation and the person on the other line was inaudible, but you put the subtitles on, now you can see. But yeah, I'll all different angles. Because I know how much is thrown into these films and the sequence of certain images. But like when I did the Matrix breakdown, and I told you, yeah, his name was Thomas Anderson. I mean, they always call him Mr. Anderson, Mr. Anderson. But I also shared when his birthday was, and his driver's license expired September 11th, 2001. Like, I was showing you different things like that. Like, if you just zoom in, freeze it, and look, you'll see, like, there's some weird stuff in there. There's some weird stuff, because the film came out in 1999, you know, and yeah, I don't want to talk about that too much, but there was a lot of things like that in that particular film. If you zoom in and just read, or read posters that are in a room, 2001 was the same way. A lot of things, if you read the displays on the computers and things like that, you can see images and things that you probably wasn't supposed to see. Eyes Wide Shut, no different, right? But here's the thing that I want you to tell me what you think of. So Kubrick died March, I think it was March 12th. Did I write a note on that? I might have wrote a note. I did. March 7th. I knew it was March. He died March 7th, 1999. Eyes Wide Shut was released July 16th, 1999. What do you think of that? What do you think of that? I'm not going to say anything yet. I'm going to read the chat, then I'm going to tell you what it could be. I'm not going to tell you what I think. I'm going to tell you what some things that it could be. But you tell me what you think of the fact that he was 70 when he died, so he wasn't really old. Yeah, he died, a few months before his last movie came out. And if you think about Eyes Wide Shut, we hadn't really seen too many movies like that, where you're actually dealing with these underground sex cults. And not only that, they were really murder cults, because they had killed, like I said, the prostitute was killed. And if you there's something so deep about that prostitute killing. Maybe another time. I'm gonna read the chat for a second. Deidre says Clockwork Orange was a full trip, and so was Eyes Wide Shut. Okay. She also says I always remember the plague mask from EWS. Eyes Wide Shut. Uh, Lo the Scholar says, when Eyes Wide Shut came out, I remember it was premiering on Cinemax, and they did a whole Kubrick marathon, and it was okay. Well, I didn't know that. It was crazy how once that movie came out, he died. I thought it wasn't a coincidence. Sister Arlene says, eyes wide shut. Your eyes are open, but you can't see what's going on. Exactly. Your eyes are open, but you cannot see what's going on. Which is kind of like what we're talking about tonight, right? Um, so yeah, one of the things, and I remember I wrote a note on this. Kubrick suffered a myocardial infarction in his sleep, right? And I don't know much about different forms of heart failure, anything like that, but I did kind of do a little research. But I have to admit, my research was biased. So I researched that that sort of event, but I researched it at an angle, right? And I'm going to tell you the angle that I researched in all fairness. Um, are there any? So I'm kind of telling you like what I kind of searched and looked up. Are there any sort of poisons that would induce a myocardial infarction? Yes, it is one of the most common ways, and poisoning somebody is one of the most common results is to have that sort of a heart event. All right. You tell me what you think. I'm not telling you what I think, anything. I'm just, sharing some stuff. But what do you think about him dying, just a couple months, like 3 months before that film Eyes Wide Shut comes out, which is clearly detailing the activities of secret societies, you know. Um, so, one of the things that I shared, and feel free to put it in the chat, I'm here. Um, he did the Barry Lyndon film, which is also was a really interesting one. And a lot of his films, like Barry Lyndon, even Eyes Wide Shut. Eyes Wide Shut was from like a 1929 novel, novella actually, I think. So a lot of his ideas, though they seem new and groundbreaking, come from older sources. You know, Brother Lowe says, I thought foul play was afoot like Sherlock Holmes. Okay. And Sister Precious says, he must have said way too much due to that lifetime contract of his. Yeah, you remember I told you he had a lifetime contract. This was the only way to shut him down. YG Gutter says it seems sketchy. Yeah, because if you think about it, again, if I'm telling a continual story, where where am I going, especially for other alchemists who may know what this story is, right? Because The Shining was clearly a continuation of 2001: A Space Odyssey, but um, Doctor Strangelove was a precursor to 2001: A Space Odyssey to the point that he used extra footage. You remember the scenes where you see the planet, like the going over the landscape, the mountains and stuff like that, and it's changing different colors. That was from Doctor Strangelove. So it's like you had enough money to take new footage, but you purposely wanted us to see that old footage. It's almost similar to like, and this is related. Everything's related that I'm saying tonight. How when I told you they changed the destination to Jupiter instead of Saturn. And remember when I first told you, I said, yeah, and it could be something else to that. And then I stopped talking. Well, there was a film that came out before 2001: A Space Odyssey called Universe. It was actually done by the BBC. And Universe, it was basically like it was like cutting edge, and it basically just showed like what the universe looks like, right? And it was cutting edge because of the special effects that they used. And it was so amazing at that time. I mean, you might look at it now and be like, I could do that on my phone. But you got to think about the time period, right? So it was cutting edge because of the effects and whatnot. So when Kubrick saw that film, he actually tried to hire the exact team from Universe to do 2001: A Space Odyssey. So he was able to get a bunch of them who worked on that film, and some of them he couldn't get. But he was like, yeah, you guys nailed this. But the interesting thing about it, his film had a bigger budget, and again had those people from that film, But in some instances, the effects on universe were better than 2001: A Space Odyssey, right? And universe was in black and white. Like that's how old the film was, right? But when I say better, more realistic. So for instance, in universe, they did show the rings of Saturn. In universe, they did show the planet's continents. So when he said, well, we didn't do Saturn, we did Jupiter because we couldn't reproduce the rings. And when I told you, I said, we'll get into that. That may not be altogether true because there was a documentary that came out that reproduced the rings in beautiful fashion, and he had that team working on his film. So that means there had to have been something else to that, right? I mean, I think. You tell me what you think, about the whole we can't do um the rings of Saturn. You know, when you talk about Saturn, just for a second, I want you to remember Saturn. And I'm gonna give it to you right now. I'm just gonna give it to you now. I want you to, when you get an opportunity, I want you to do some research, those of you who have not already, on the Saturn death cult. The Saturn death cult. This is not the same Saturn cult of antiquity, where there was that sun worship and thing. This is a little different. Um, but and there was even a book written. There was a couple books written on the Saturn death cult. Um, I will say, I speculate that, for instance, when he did 2001: A Space Odyssey, he did not film Saturn or create Saturn because the Saturn death cult said, no, there is a path to arrive at Saturn, and you can't go straight from the moon to Saturn. So you have to take the actual path. Now, when Arthur C. Clarke wrote his book, his destination was Saturn. He kept it in his book. But in the film, they didn't show Saturn. That's something that I speculate, and for a couple other reasons, because especially when he filmed Eyes Wide Shut, the cult you saw in there was basically the Saturn death cult. That was basically them, and then he dies right after he does. He doesn't even see the film released, his own film. He doesn't even get to see it released in the box office. He dies before it's released, right? But somebody saw it. Obviously, it just wasn't released in theaters, but there were premieres and everything like that. And there was a lot of friction after that film with he and Tom Cruise. There was a lot of friction. In fact, it was an interesting story in regards to Jack Nicholson, who starred in the Shining, right? He came out of that movie with Shelley Duvall as an enemy because she talked about the scene when she was holding the bat, when Jack was coming after him, when he was doing it, here's Johnny, and she's holding it back. And she said Kubrick made her do that scene so many times that her hands were bleeding and went raw from holding the bat, and her face got all puffy from crying, almost like if it was a ritual. And he made Jack Nicholson say, here's Johnny 78 times. 78 times. And obviously, we all know Jack Nicholson is a brilliant actor. Like, he's probably a one taker most of the time. And he's so weird and crazy. Whatever he does is going to be interesting. He made him say, Johnny, here's Johnny 78 times, even though that's not his name. Yeah, the tears were real in that scene. Yes. Like he literally abused her. He literally tortured her in that scene, to the point she was bleeding. Like she had to have her hands taken care of and wrapped and everything like that, and then tortured Jack Nicholson with the here's Johnny, here's Johnny, here's Johnny 78 times. Yeah, who wasn't afraid of Jack Nicholson after that shit? Every time you went in the bathroom, you looking behind you. Afraid somebody's going to hit an axe through the door. But again, if you understand the movement of his work, you know, it was a continuation of 2001: A Space Odyssey. We'll get into a little bit of that. Sovereignty says Kubrick was known to do that to his actors to force them into emotional state, right? That is realistic, and a lot of them hated him as a result. Uh, it's similar to when he filmed. What film was it? It wasn't Full Metal Jacket, was it? It was a film where it was like a jungle scene, and the conclusion of the film was actually in the jungle, and he didn't feel like leaving. He called his writing area in London Mission One, which was interesting. Kubrick always thought in terms of like he was an astronaut. Um, and when it came time to film, they were supposed to go to the Philippines or something like that. And he was like, nope, I'm not leaving London. And they had to end up filming in London. And you imagine filming a jungle in London. He was like, I don't care. I'm not leaving. You know, so he was very clear on like time and place and the rhythm of season and stars and things like that. Um, so yeah, those are some of the films that he did. And like I said, he began production on uh, Barry Lyndon right after Clockwork Orange. Clockwork Orange, no, Barry Lyndon was in 75. Clockwork Orange was in 71. 2001: A Space Odyssey was in 68, right? And again, all of these films have these really kind of deep, exploitive, themes to them, you know. Yeah, Full Metal Jacket. I know it has a jungle scene. That's why I'm wondering. Like, I think it was Full Metal Jacket. Um, so now that we've covered Kubrick a little bit and we've gotten to think about his death a bit, right? And then we could also think about that night he died. Jack Nicholson was at a Lakers game. A lot of you know he's always courtside at the Lakers game. And during the game, he gets a call. This is documented. And of course, people would say, I don't mean anything. And he shouts out, "We did it." But there was nothing going on in the game at that time. He shouts out, "We did it." The night that Kubrick is transitioning, we'll say. I don't want to say anything else. I'll let you figure it out. So let's get into this other idea of propaganda, right? That's what because 2001: A Space Odyssey is about propaganda. Dark Side of the Moon is about propaganda. Okay. Full Metal Jacket does have junk. See, at the end they singing Mickey Mouse. There's a reason they're singing Mickey Mouse. Man, let me tell you something. You know how, and some of you have said this about my podcast. Like, Chief, I went back and listened, and I realized like this was connected to this, and that was connected to that, and that was connected to that. Like you've been building up to something. That's what all of these. I mean, shoot, I wish I had all these movies in them. Though, I just got a little podcast, but that's what it's the same thing. If you can make the same connection, it's all connected. Not only that, even a documentary that came out in 1966. I put a link to it already in the description of this video. You should check it out later. But it's the documentary about the making of 2001: A Space Odyssey. It came out like 2 years before the movie actually was released, right? Deep. It's so deep if you know how to watch it. You see that they were giving you the symbols and this. I'll get into what's in it. I don't want to give away my secrets yet. Right. So, but let's get into propaganda, because that's really what we're speaking about this evening. Mickey Mouse, the Disney connection, right? The Disney connection is real. Sovereignty says maybe he was not from this plane of existence, like the lead guy and the man who fell to earth. Maybe Kubrick was like an Elon Musk. He was from somewhere else, or maybe he just gained access to somewhere else, or some people who had access to people from somewhere else. We'll get into that in a second. You tell me what you think. But let's get into propaganda, because again, that's what these films are about. A lot of films are about propaganda. propaganda is, we call things a lot of times political, but we only know about political things because of propaganda. You know what I mean? Um, so propaganda comes from the Latin propagandere, dere, right? Propagandere, which means to send forward or to expand, right? And a lot of folks, if you do some research, will tell you that the word came about in the 17th century by way of the Catholic Church, and they used it as a term to speak about the propagation of the Christian religion. So they would speak about like places they need to go and spread Christianity. We need to propagate here. We need to propagate over there. So originally, I don't want to say originally because the word is older really than it, but in earlier times, the word had a positive connotation because it was related to the Catholic Church, you know. But those of us who know some things about some things, we might not, have a positive connotation, maybe due to the fact that it's connected to the Catholic Church, right? Um, but nonetheless, that's what the term, it was really speaking about, describing like a holy endeavor. When I'm propagating the word of God, I'm sending it out to different places. So that's where propaganda was first used. It was by a pope in the 17th century. He was like the first one, they say, to really use that word propaganda. And then later, it received uh, more negative press, if you will, or a more negative connotation when it was used by the Nazi Party. you know and so now when people would say propaganda, like Nazi propaganda, they would it was described to push the or to speak about the pushing of an evil agenda. But the reality is that propaganda is neutral. It's not necessarily good or bad things. For instance, at one point in my organization, I had a minister of propaganda, and I remember the elders came to me one day, one Sabbath, after we had our meeting, and they were like, we need to use a different term. We need to use a different term. I don't like that word propaganda. I'm like, what's the problem? Like, it's just a word. It's neutral. And like, yeah, but it doesn't feel right. And I respected it, because these are also elders who came up in the 60s and whatnot, and their connection with the idea of propaganda may have been a little different than mine. I may have been coming in eyes wide shut. Like, no, it's a cool word. There's nothing wrong with it. And of course I understood the connotation, but sometimes in young people, that's the stupid rebelliousness in us. Yeah, I know it's supposed to mean this, but it really mean this. So I'm going to say without really recognizing, you have to be able to relate to your target audience at the same time, and all of that tough Ogun stuff, kicking the door and this is it doesn't always work. And I had to learn that. I had to learn that when I was younger. I didn't understand it as well. So propaganda is an important thing, because it's forever active. There's a saying that if you're hearing something and you cannot find the propaganda, it's the propaganda, right? Saying that is basically ever present. And no matter what you're doing or thinking, it's there. There's that other saying: if you go to a poker game and you look around the table and you don't see a sucker, you're the sucker. So it's something that you can't escape. It is always going to be present. So propaganda is the idea of pushing or sending out a particular agenda, or a particular idea based on someone's need to persuade you towards what they have a bias towards already, or what they already have an agenda, shaped towards. That's what propaganda is, right? And 2001, a space Odyssey was like a tutorial in how to spot propaganda. That's why there were so many inconsistencies. You even see the scene when Frank, excuse me, Frank Poole, he's jogging on the ship and he's punching while he's running. You remember when you first see him on the centrifuge, And if you look, you're going to notice a couple of things I didn't say before. I want to see if anybody picked up on it. But if you go back and look, you'll see it. As he's going around the circle, you see the other members of the crew in cryo sleep, right? Remember, there's 3 members in the crew who are in cryo sleep, which you got to also remember. Well, we'll get into cryo sleep a little bit. But a lot of these ideas didn't even exist in the psyche. Like by 2001, we'll be able to put people in the cryo sleep. You remember that long held rumor about Walt Disney? He was actually in cryo sleep, and waiting until technology came in society to actually revive him. But right now, he's somewhere in cryo sleep. I don't know if you guys ever heard that. That used to be a rumor back in the 90s, I think maybe even the 80s. And then I remember when Michael Jackson transitioned, people said the same thing about him, that he was put into cryo sleep, you know. So the point I'm saying, though, when he's jogging and running, you see the 3 astronauts in cryo sleep on the right of him. And then when you see him running some more, they're on the left of him. That doesn't make sense. They were clearly on his right side. He didn't turn around. And then they were on the left, right? Which you start to see in the movie that Kubrick is playing with reflections. So the whole time, you don't know if you're looking at something. That's why a lot of times when you see David Bowman, he looks at a reflection of himself. Mirrors are used a lot. They look at a reflection, or you're seeing a reflection in the helmet, or you're seeing a reflection of the light console in his helmet. Reflections, that he's using that a lot to try to show you something. So when you watch 2001: A Space Odyssey, what you'll see a lot is Kubrick is trying to teach you how to spot propaganda. Then when we watch Dark Side of the Moon in 2002, it's a mockumentary about propaganda. But even in 2001: A Space Odyssey, remember, it's the scene where they're at the conference and he's like, look, this is what we're going to have to tell the people. So they're showing you even how they have right, Sister Naya, under Epcot. You remember? Yeah, they used to say that. Walt used to say it, probably still say it. I don't know. Walt Disney is under Epcot in cryo sleep. I don't doubt it, to be honest with you, because rich people do all kind of stuff and they have access to all sort of things. And I just know, as someone who's worked with a lot of very wealthy people in the work that I do, I get offered all kinds of money to create all sorts of experiences. And it's always like baffling when I say no. Like, nah, you get somebody else to do that. Because like I'm not gonna damage my power for you to perform for you, or because you did something super crazy and you don't want the press to find out, or we're not doing that. You call somebody else. You know. So I am no stranger to know, like, the things that people with money, they just throw some money at it. Just throw some money at it. Make it go away. You know, R. Kelly just got 30 years. Can you imagine how much that case costs? In the millions. This has been, and it's not even over because he still got to go back to Chicago for the pornography and the obstruction of justice charges. But he got 30 years. I promise you, he probably spent like 4 or 5 million on that case. Easy, 4 or 5 million. You know, um, just throw some money at it; it'll go away. People in those positions, that's how they imagine. When he could have took that money and I would took that money and had somebody break me out of jail. I'm 50. I can go live somewhere else for the next 30 years of my life. Grow a beard and go up in the jungles and just ride it on out. This is it. All right. Look at old videos of myself. Yeah, I was doing it. I ain't going back. I spent 2 million to break out whatever. But anyway, I guess everybody's different. So propaganda is what these films are about, right? There was a quote by H.G. Wells I thought was interesting. H.G. Wells was an English author, for those not familiar. And he was also a commentary on politics and history and things like that. Um, but he wrote, "Our business is to kill ideas. The ultimate purpose of this war is propaganda, the destruction of certain beliefs, and the creation of others." I'm going to read that again. I want y'all to really, really, really get it. That's a very important statement in regards to these films. Our business is to kill ideas. The ultimate purpose of this war is propaganda, the destruction of certain beliefs, and the creation of others. So, propaganda isn't just about programming your mind, it's about removing the potential of what you may hope or think about. Like, so for instance, you might see something that happens. Let's say if you get a news report and somebody says, there were lights in the sky, and then you start thinking, oh, it's extraterrestrial craft. They will use propaganda to destroy the potential of that idea in your brain and then put something else. Oh, the person who saw it, they were on methamphetamines, there were weather balloons in the area at the time. Da, 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 da. Before you even start thinking it, because in order to see things, you have to see them internally first. You have to be able to draw up a clear mental image in order to see anything in physical reality. So if I allow you to cultivate and develop your imagination, then eventually you'll be able to see things that are outside of your periphery, your current periphery, that I have programmed into you. So I use propaganda to make sure that I to ensure the way you think. You're going to see this, you're going to see that. Don't worry about the other stuff. You're going to see this, that, and the third. That's what propaganda is used for. So the H.G. Wells, what he said was so key, especially when he said, the ultimate purpose of this war is propaganda. So you would think that in order to maybe be successful at a war, we'll use propaganda. No, he's saying we'll use propaganda we'll use war to create the propaganda. The propaganda or the shaping of the mind is more important than the money we make from war. You see? Because you think about all the things that you're able to do as a result of war, all the experiments. Because one of the tools of proper propaganda is name calling. And once you can get a society locked into name calling and labeling, it gives you carte blanche to do whatever you want, right? So you speak to certain people, and I'm going to use some offensive terms, who were in war. They'll tell you, yeah, we were over there killing the Japs, not killing another human being, not killing another individual, not killing another person. We were killing insurgents, or what's the term they used in Iraq? It was combatant civilians. Combatant civilians. Instead of just saying people or civilians who live there, combatant civilians. Oh, okay, then it's okay. What is an insurgent but a combatant civilian, or someone who an insurgent is basically a protester, but I'll label them a protester and not a person who has a protest. So, and there's so many different words, right? Like I'm barely, called the Germans the Huns, right? I saw that in the movie before. The Huns, Krauts, over there killing Krauts. You see, like, there's a lot. There's a lot. And then of course, even on the landmass in North America, mix, wops, wetbacks, niggers. There's so many different terms of labeling that use. All of that is propaganda. It's all propaganda. That's why certain words stick and other words don't. You know, we don't use jigaboo. Jigaboo doesn't have the same power as nigger, or shine or sambo. Those are not a part of our colloquial vernacular. We don't use those in like rap songs and stuff. We use the word that's been given to us by way of propaganda, right? A spade. There's a bunch of them. We use words that have been given to us by propaganda because it's entire agendas based around those words. We need you to use this word because we've established a campaign based on this particular word. Spook, even, right? We don't use spook. But if you think about it, those words are not as scary as nigger. And then especially when you use propaganda, one of the most powerful things to do is to um, bestialize your target of propaganda. So, like, you remember years ago when Mel Gibson had that rant on the phone, and he was talking to his ex-wife, and he said, I hope you get raped by a pack of niggers. You know, he got in a lot of trouble. I thought it was hilarious. I'm sorry. I think it was just funny. He's just screaming on that, and that, and that Australian accent. You know, I was just laughing. When I heard the recording, I was just thinking, like, I mean, I had tears coming out. I was laughing so hard. I was thinking about Danny Glover. I was like, like, what is Danny Glover thinking right now? Yeah, and I hope I can't even do the Australian accent. You know, I hope you get raped by a pack of niggas, right? So I have to say a pack. Or back in the days during the Central Park tragedy, when young men were railroaded, they came out with this term wilding, which became really a media thing because on the streets we wasn't talking about no wild. Nobody even used that term. That wasn't anything anybody said. Teens wilding, the new craze. Teens are wilding. I was in the streets in New York at the time. We were not wilding. I don't know what the hell that is. You know, so you might say wild out, like you wilding out, but that wasn't a thing. You know what I mean? But you use a term like wilding, it sounds animalistic. A pack, it sounds animalistic. So you can use term like these monsters, these animals, these beasts. And when you start to do that, then now you can wage any kind of abuse that you want on the individual because they're not a person. You see, they're this propagandized object. You've objectified them and dehumanized them and invalidated their perspective. You invalidated their values, everything, because you've reduced them to that propaganda. Very important, right? So there's so many tools of propaganda. Even bandwagoning is a tool of propaganda. Everybody's doing it. Everybody knows, right? So Kubrick was teaching us how this happens, right? And then when we watched this documentary, Dark Side of the Moon, it went even deeper, right? I haven't even scratched the surface, so let me get moving. Look at some of my notes here. I was thinking about Edward Bernays, and if you guys don't know about Edward L. Bernays, he's a good person to. It's all the rave today, right? All the rave, you know. It's similar to music, right? I know, just jump right back off again. I did a video earlier. It hasn't even I haven't even uploaded it, but speaking about like music and things, like how we lost a lot of our soul. And I've been saying this for years because I enjoy so many different types of music. It's awkwardly eclectic, right? But when I think about music of old that came from my community, so much in the titling of it is what gave it its humanity. And then I look at some of the other music that I may have enjoyed, and the humanity of it was purposely extracted by the terminology, right? So coming up on soul music, rhythm and blues music, the gospel music, Caribbean music, reggae music. All of these terms relate themselves to a people, a lifestyle, a culture, even a feeling. Love music, shoot, we used to make mixtapes back in the day. Depending on what you were getting into, sex tape. I know this is a special tape, sex tape. Then you had your regular mixtape, you know. So, but everything was based on something that was done in the sense of a humanizing effort. And then there was other music I listened to that was called metal, rock, grunge, acid, uh, death metal, you know, things like that. So it would that type of music purposely wanted to extract the humanity out of it. So now inside of that music, you could say whatever you want because you've extracted the humanity. We could almost say punk, Brother Low, but I wouldn't say punk so much because early punk music was very similar to early hip hop. Early punk music was really about going raging against the system. Really speaking about some of the dangers of falling into the conformity of the system and breaking free of that. You know, and then it got turned into something else because then it went more into the grunge and the metal, where now it became more like I hate my parents, kill, 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 kill. You know what I mean? But you can say anything like that once you dehumanize the music. Oh, this isn't music, this is metal. Nobody even would say metal music. You see, you would just say metal. I listen to metal. You might say rock music because Little Richard told you to. Bo Diddley told you to. Because it was really rock and roll. And it wasn't rock like, dehumanizing. It was rock and roll because we're talking about the movements that you do along with this sort of movement. You're rocking and rolling like you in church. So it's something different, right? So Edward L. Benet, when I was speaking about, good person for you to know, he said something I thought was very important. And he said, we are governed, our minds molded, our taste formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. This is a logical result of the way our democratic society is organized. See? He's talking about propaganda. I'll repeat it again. We are governed, our minds molded, our taste formed, our ideas suggested, largely by men we have never heard of. This is a logical result of the way our democratic society is organized. So he's telling you, yo, there's propaganda in everything. The, the taste that you want, the way you think, your mind, whatever, it's all a result of the propaganda that's been imputed into you, right? And again, that's what Kubrick was making clear to you. Like, you watching this movie, but let me show you how everything's a movie. I'm going to show you the inconsistencies. The planet doesn't have any continents on it. Now, if you look at the film that he loved, where he hired the crew from, Universe, they did a shot of the planet Earth. It was more crude, but they did a shot in black and white, and it had continents. It had continents. So it was possible, but there was so many different things that Kubrick was kind of showing you. Um, yeah, not going to be in there, right? So let's look at the documentary for a second. Um, Dark Side of the Moon. Now, just the term alone, when you think of Dark Side of the Moon, I'm wondering, some of you may think of Pink Floyd, some of you may not even know who the heck that is. But what are some of the thoughts that come to your mind when someone says Dark Side of the Moon? I'm curious. You could put it in the chat. Could be Transformers or whatever. Don't feel embarrassed if it is. You know. Um, so as you're doing that, I want to speak about something kind of important for a second, right? Well, it's all important, right? But this is going to feel like a left, but it's not a left. Everything secrets behind the moon. Yeah, it's a good thing to think about. Secrets behind the moon. Yeah. What's interesting too, in 2001: A Space Odyssey, there's a scene where he shows the dark side of the moon, but you can actually see the craters. That doesn't make sense. You wouldn't have been able to see them. So Kubrick is almost like showing like there is something there. He showed a shadowed image of the moon, which was also very interesting because you show the planet with no continents. You say you can't show Saturn, but I know it was because of that Saturn death call. But then you show the surface of the moon with all its detail, craters. He even named the craters correctly and everything, all his detail. So it was like you were really pointing to the moon, even though the mission was to Jupiter. You were really pointing us to the moon, and of course, um, we get the Apollo 11 moon mission the next year, which we'll get into for a second. Okay, Jeremiah says Lilith in the subconscious mind. Can you explain to me why Lilith? How does Lilith fit into that dark side? I think I know where you're going with this. And if if it is where I think you're going, I think that's a pretty cool thing to share. So please tell me why you say Lilith. And if it's where I think you're going, I know this is an extra question. What would the light side of the moon represent to you? I think I know where you're going, what you're going to say, but I think it's cool to explore. So as he's hopefully putting that together, it's not a left turn. It's gonna feel like it, but it's not. It's all related. And you could tell me in the chat. Anybody familiar with Operation Paperclip? Okay, I'm gonna give you a couple of seconds if you know what Operation Paperclip is, and feel free to please put that in the chat. I have a suspicion Brother Lowe knows what Operation Paperclip is. If you do, definitely share it. All right, and you're probably gonna wonder, well, what does Operation Paperclip have to do with what we're talking about? A lot, you know. Now there was something that was said. Lo, you only know the name. Oh, I would think you'd be right on top of it, but then again, maybe not, because yeah, that is up your alley. Yeah, you just slipping. That's all. So there was something that was said in the documentary Dark Side of the Moon, right? And one of the things that was said was NASA. I'm a quote from the documentary. NASA quickly realized that the race to the moon was really a war of images between. I just Googled it. Nah, that doesn't count. Like anybody could do that. It was actually if you know what it is. Like knowing means you know, right? I know what it means now. What if you knew when I first asked? But at least you was honest about Googling it. Because most time y'all ain't honest about that. Y'all just start talking and then I'll be like, tell me more. Hold up. You gotta look on your screen. So NASA, this is the quote from the documentary. NASA quickly realized that the race to the moon was really a war of images between the Russians and the United States because our facilities were pretty rudimentary and the space center was really laughable. The space race had to be turned into a pure Hollywood product. Let me read it again. See, I'm double reading. I'm doing my pastor thing. You know what I mean? Dark Side of the Moon. NASA quickly realized that the race to the moon was really a war of images between the Russians and the United States because our facilities were pretty rudimentary and the space center was really laughable. The space race had to be turned into a pure Hollywood product. Now this is on the mockumentary Dark Side of the Moon. That's a quote from the mockumentary. And they stress to make they say it's mockumentary, but I don't think it was. Sovereignty says that part of the moon that remains aligned with the earth but is unexplored and unseen due to the shadows of the earth that blocks it, it remains devoid of light but may be purposely hidden. Okay. Canaveral wasn't nothing to speak of. Okay. All right, we got some thoughts and some ideas coming in. So, Operation Paperclip, right? Now, of course, Naya looked it up. Probably some more of you looked it up. This was an operation. I guess we'll call it. It is called Operation Paperclip, but it was a process that was done where I think it was 169. It might have been more than that actually. Nazi scientists were brought over from Germany and brought into the U.S. to work, basically to form NASA. This is before there was even a NASA. but these were Nazis. Now, I want to also share, because again, we talk about labeling, right? We just talked about propaganda. Now, according to the propaganda, you're supposed to hate Nazis, right? So if I'm sub- oh 1600, I did write it down. Over 1600 German scientists. I knew it was a six in there somewhere. If I'm supposed to hate these people, and they're not people, they're Nazis. If I'm supposed to hate them, why would I want them coming over here helping us, quote unquote, to develop technology? And what they really were working on primarily was missile technology. And they really took the US like light years into the future in terms of missile technology, which allowed them to then send crafts to the moon, which is kind of interesting. Um, if you think about it, because it's like it almost makes you believe some of the theorists that say that the Nazis did actually go to the dark side of the moon. There's a let me see if I can find it real quick, because I got a copy of it. There's a film, and I'm gonna tell you the film, and you're gonna think it's silly. But don't don't think it's silly. It's silly, but it's Iron Sky. If you ever get an opportunity and you're gonna watch it, you're gonna be just dumb. It's not dumb. Just watch it. Just watch it. Iron Sky. Okay. And there's two of them. Watch both parts. Iron Sky. Okay, which is about the dark side of the moon. But the point I'm saying is that they brought these um these people, like I could call them Nazis, of course, and dehumanize them, or I could just say that they brought these people over, and like I said, it was 1600. Science, they were scientists, they were engineers, and they were technicians, and the U.S. After World War II, this is between like 1945 and 1959. The U.S. brought them over, and they created what we know today to be as NASA. Okay, so why is this important? Well, once you watch the documentary, again, I put a link to it in the description of the video. If you look at that, and then you also look at the film 2001: A Space Odyssey, all of a sudden, like I said, once you know things, your awareness opens up. You're going to see, like I said, Celtic crosses. Why would there be Celtic crosses on the bottom of these ships? Well, what other organization use the Celtic cross? Does anybody know? I'll let you put it in the chat. Does anybody know what other organization used the Celtic cross as a symbol? Okay. Uh I saw something in the chat. Lotus Scholar says, why are you hiring them for the Manhattan Project? Right. These are supposed to be like enemy number one, and you bring 1600 of them over. Now, again, I want to also emphasize again the labeling that's done by way of propaganda to dehumanize. Um, there were a lot of people who were professionals during that time in Nazi Germany who would not be able to work if they did not pledge allegiance to the party. So, for instance, like doctors, and some of the doctors who were Jews at that time were able to maintain their standing if they cooperated and helped with the eugenics agenda, which of course later became Planned Parenthood. I probably shouldn't even talk about that right now because everybody's just so up in arms. But we want our eugenics. So, you know, um, there were people who were just minding their business and was like, okay, well, if I join this party and bring my talents to it, I'll be able to rise up in social stature, you know. Um, so yes, they do. They do sovereignty. She said the KKK, yes. But also there's another group, your Margaret Sanger. Yeah, Margaret Sanger. And but who else uses the Celtic cross aside from the KKK? Because you got to think about where did the KKK get it from, right? Um, so it talks about the war of images, And if you think about it, we talk about propaganda. When we talk about moon landings and things like that, what do we have other than images? What do we have? It's not like we can go look in a telescope right now and look at a huge American flag on the moon. All we have is some footage that some may consider to be questionable based on some elements of the actual uh, of the actual footage, right? Um, but it really was the image. So if we had seen that image, or we had seen the image of the Russians there first, or the Nazis there first, you know, what would our what would the power of the propaganda of those particular organizations represent at that point? If there was a Nazi flag on the moon, what power would that have injected into our subconscious, right? And we have to say "are," because a lot of times when they're depicted doing the things that they did, they don't show all of the people who were subject to the things that they did. They just show one group of people, and that's just not historically accurate. Brother Lowe says the Celtic cross looks like, thank you, you got it. The Celtic cross looks like the Nazi Iron Cross. Now you might say, why are we talking about Nazis? 1600 Nazi German engineers and scientists were brought over during Operation Paperclip. Now you might say, well, that ain't got nothing to do with the movie though. Even if there were Celtic crosses on the ships and the missiles that the Nazis were giving the U.S. intelligence to build at that time, and then Kubrick showed in the movie, ain't got nothing to do with it. Okay, maybe. But then we look at the documentary. I put the link in the description. The first words of the documentary, very interesting. Before you even get to the first words, there's an office scene in that documentary. And I'm telling you now, so you'll see it, so you won't let it pass by you. In the documentary, it starts off, you see some men carrying briefcases down the street, right? And you're like, what does that got to do with anything? But it has a lot to do with things. Um, when you see certain symbols in film and stuff like that, don't just look at it like for what it is, look at the name. So for instance, if I'm walking with a briefcase and I'm walking down the street, it may be symbolically I'm expressing that I am sharing information with the public, because a briefcase, debriefing, we're debriefing, right? And I'm walking, so this information is now being sent out, right? So when we go to the film or the documentary, and this was again 2 years before 2001: A Space Odyssey came out. This was a documentary on the making of, and they revealed so many secrets. In fact, the guy who plays David Bowman in the film, they go to his house and they interview him. I think it was the BBC. And he says this line specifically. He says, "Yeah, this movie." He was like, "Well, tell us about your character." And he's like, "Well, I'm something like Ulysses. Remember, I told you that this film was a ritual that was like the Odyssey, and remember, the main character in the Odyssey was Ulysses. David Bowman calls himself Ulysses. It was no accident, right?" Um, so right, and Brother Lowe says, and those Nazis were able to get citizenship quick. 10 years or nothing. No 10 years, not right. They just brought them right in. You're citizens, you got immunity. Just come over here and build these missiles for us. Build these missiles. Show us how you went to the moon. Well, if you did go, because obviously the US went first. US does everything first. So again, the war of images. Now, when we look at the documentary, Dark Side of the Moon, um, we see we see tools of mockumentaries. Mockumentaries often are more powerful than documentaries, because documentaries lie all the time. We think because we're watching documentaries, it's got to be real. It's a documentary. They make stuff up all the time. But with a mockumentary, they use a lot of interesting tools. They use parody. A lot of times they use satire, and they use misinformation. And that misinformation is to make you think more critically about whatever it is that they're making a parody of, right? So when you watch Dark Side of the Moon, they're making a satirical parody about um the film 2001: A Space Odyssey, and how Stanley Kubrick actually helped to film the moon landing. He falsified the 1969 Apollo 11 moon landing. Now, the reason this particular mockumentary came out by this director, this French director, is because there are so many conspiracies and thoughts going around that like you guys faked the moon landing. So they address it in the mockumentary. But this is what's so deep about it. This is what's so deep about it. Why address it? Why does it need to be addressed? And this was not a small level mockumentary. Now I want to share some things. I made a list of something here that I feel was important, and you could tell me, right? Um, there were certain people in this film that I feel like should be brought out, right? And then I'm gonna get back to the Nazi thing in a second because it's important. So these are the people that were in the mockumentary as themselves. Now, for those of you who watched it, you already know what I'm talking about, right? But you might not have recognized some of these people. Christine Kubrick. Now that's Stanley Kubrick's widow, right? She was in the mockumentary. Now, just to be clear, this mockumentary is making fun of the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. It's making fun of the U.S. government. It's making fun of the Russian government. It's making fun of the astronauts in the Apollo 11 mission. It's making fun of NASA. So just so you're clear, right? Christine Kubrick, Jan Harlan, right? And Jan Harlan was the producer or the executive producer for Kubrick's films. Like she did Barry Lyndon, okay. And Jan Harlan is also Christine's brother, by the way, okay. So Henry Kissinger, Donald Rumsfeld, Alexander Haig, Lawrence Eagleburger. Now, these were all, we're going back again in 1968. At the time, these were all members of Richard Nixon's cabinet, right? These were all members of Rich. So these are serious men. These are not like, these are not comedians. These are serious men. Then, of course, we had Buzz Aldrin. That was in it. We had David Scott. We had Jeffrey Hoffman. Those are two NASA astronauts, obviously retired at this point. But these are real astronauts. Buzz Aldrin, or his real name is Edwin Aldrin. Buzz Aldrin, David Scott, Jeffrey Hoffman, real NASA astronauts were in this mockumentary, this joke film. Then we had Farouk El-Baz. Now, Farouk El-Baz is he's from Egypt. We'll say Egypt. He's actually an Egyptian. These are real people playing themselves. He's an Egyptian scientist that works with NASA. Okay. And of course, he worked on the Apollo programs. We have another real person, Richard Helms. Now, these names might sound familiar to some of you. Richard Helms was the director of the CIA in 1966. Okay, this was during the Nixon era. We also have Vernon Walters, right? Vernon Walters was someone who was really highly in depth about, highly informed and knowledgeable about the moon race between Russia and the U.S. Interesting enough, he died right after the mockumentary, like literally right after he did his interview for the mockumentary. He died right after it. Okay. Then we had again, these are all just a list of people who when I watched the mockumentary, I was like, that's a real person, that's a real person, that's a real person, right? Winston Lord. Now he was the president of council, foreign council relations under and he was with Henry Kissinger when he was going back and forth to Vietnam. Okay, so these were the real people, and there was some fictional characters as well, like David Bowman was in there, and obviously David Bowman was an actor in the movie and stuff like that. But these are all real people. Now, how did he get these real people in the film? Because he did a film prior to or this particular, I'm saying this person who did the mockumentary, he did a film prior to this mockumentary, and he used the B-roll footage and some of the stock White House footage, and he pieced it all together, and along with the fake interviews and stuff. That's what we're told. But I want you to think about something here, because these are serious people. We're talking about the faking of the moon landing. We're making jokes about Richard Nixon. We're making jokes about the United States. And you have the director of the CIA who's in your little French mockumentary, and he's laughing and making jokes while he's being interviewed. Because if you watch, there's a bloopers outtake that appears towards the end, and that's supposed to show you that, oh, this wasn't real. Now, of course, there's jokes, like they're talking about, oh, Buzz Aldrin was drunk. Joke, because Buzz Aldrin is an alcoholic. Like, he's spoken openly about, like, he's battled with alcoholism. So they made jokes about him being on the moon, drunk, and stuff like that. But so again, right, Naya, I was getting ready to say that. Sister Naya said, always some truth in a joke. Exactly. So that's how they used propaganda in this mockumentary, because they come out with 2001: A Space Odyssey, 1968. They do the moon landing in 1969. People then take the footage and dissect it. Something is not right here. We think you faked this. And when we look at Kubrick's footage is starting to make sense, right? So they say, okay, we have to figure out a way to propagate our idea, to push our thought. Let's do this mockumentary. It comes from France. It's not coming from the US. And we'll make fun of the people who think that this was a conspiracy by agreeing with them, and then showing just how crazy you must be by making a joke out of it. Oh my God. It's like, I am always amazed at the mechanisms of the parasitical elite. I have to be honest. I'm not a person that gets upset when things happen or we see I'm like, wow. For me, it's like playing chess against someone who's really good. Wow, that was an amazing move. So when I see something like this, I'm like, wow, that was smart. Because you think about it. These are people who you've probably never seen on film. You've probably never seen them on film. Donald Rumsfeld, you've probably never seen him on film, or laughing and joking and stuff like that. So in order for me to get you in a documentary, documentaries pay nothing. You know what I mean? What kind of pull by this no-name director for the most part, right? And of course, we're saying, oh, he used B-roll and put it together and stuff like that. But they could have said, no, you can't use my footage for that. Wouldn't you think that based on the subject, and I don't want to push an idea to you, but based on the subject matter, that most of them be like, oh no, no, that's not anything to joke about, or joking about. Part of the documentary, they talked about how Richard Nixon wanted to put a hit out, or he tried to put a hit out, but it was unsuccessful on the filmmakers. So they hired this team of filmmakers to film and fake the landing. And then afterwards, Richard Nixon got nervous and was like, oh man, what if this actually gets out? So he puts a hit out on him. And they make a whole joke about it. But it's not really a joke because they're saying it seriously, but you have to assume it's a joke. You would assume it's a joke because what president would put a hit? Oh, this is the Patriot Act. That's right. Where you can send drones into other countries, and the president can just command drone strikes domestically or foreign. Right. I forgot about that. But this is 1966. Right. So we would never imagine that the president would put a hit out on somebody. So you can say it and put it out there and then make a joke about it. So now if I believe something like that, someone has already laughed at me for believing that. Someone has already gone so far as to make a joke about it, a mockery of it, for me believing that the president may do something like that, or that these landings were fake. were faked and were filmed by this producer. You know, I spoke to you before. I'm gonna go to chat and I'll come back. Sanaya says, is that when they called him cold-blooded for the recording? I don't remember that part. Sovereign Eats, funny, I just watched a documentary showing Japan's 2019 recent discovery of quartz rock on the actual dark side of the moon. Yeah. Sovereign Eats also says in one of the statements that was made was that Japan thought that the USA would have discovered this before they did. Right. Then you got to think about, why was that statement made? It's not on face value. Why did they say that? Are they telling you that the US did discover it already? You see, that's what Kubrick was doing in this film. He's like, I'm going to show you how we do this. I'm going to show you how this is done. And who knows, maybe that's what eventually got him killed. Just like in Eyes Wide Shut, I'm going to show you how these secret societies operate. I'm going to show you. This is how it's done. Think about this, Doctor Strange. What was it? Into the Multiverse, where he goes to that other dimension and a man comes up and he's like, yeah, we're the Illuminati. Doctor Strange. Well, we got Doctor Strangelove. What was so deep about Doctor Strangelove, right? Because that was also kind of like a silly movie. It was silly, but it wasn't silly, because you got to know what to look for. It was not silly. There's a person that you should all know. His name is Werner von Braun. Werner von Braun. He may be familiar to some of you because he's famous. Like, if you're into aeronautics, you know who he is, right? He was one of the Nazi scientists that were brought over from Nazi Germany. And he was basically the head of NASA. You know, he's the one who, like, he was the main guy who really brought all of this missile technology and everything like that. And if you watch the 1966 documentary, he's in it. The Making of 2001: A Space Odyssey. But he died in, like, I want to say 59, somewhere around there. He died before the movie came out. But he designed the centrifuge that you see in the movie. But when he designed the centrifuge, he didn't design it for a movie. He was seriously saying, this is what we can do with the technology that we're going to come into. And he showed how, he even explained, like, yeah, when we build this, we're going to have to first do it on the ground before we launch it. And basically the way the centrifuge worked is that, you remember, it was like this circle, but there were pieces that came together and they each had their own propulsion. So they would, like, basically go up into the air and then they would connect in space. And he showed how, like, this section would be a hospital, this section with it was all mapped out. And that's the model of what they used for 2001: A Space Odyssey. Now, interesting enough, when you look at the documentary, that's why I say I want you to watch this, you're going to catch something. The documentary that I put in, and I keep saying in the description because it's different than Dark Side of the Moon. It's a different one. The Making of 2001: A Space Odyssey. In the beginning, right after they show the men with the briefcase, they fast forward to an office. And they're scanning in the office, they're scanning this magazine rack, right? For you young people, a magazine is something that we used to have many years ago that was made out of paper. And it had different pictures and stories inside of it. I know y'all just got this, you know, but they have this magazine rack, right? They got all Time and all this different stuff. And on the rack, I want to say it's maybe 3 levels down, somewhere around there. It's a big old picture of a swastika. A big old, nice, pretty red swastika. And it's on the front of a magazine. It's like the front page. And then they go right from the swastika, and then they go across, and then they go to a guy sitting at the desk. Right? You gotta watch this stuff. And the first thing he says is, well, thanks to the work of Dr. Werner von Braun, we're talking about the movie 2001: A Space Odyssey. The first thing you show me in the movie is two men walking down the street with briefcases. Then you show me a SWAT sticker. Then you show me. Then the first dialogue and the documentary is someone talking to me about a Nazi scientist. And you wonder why you saw Celtic crosses on the ships in 2001: A Space Odyssey. Just so you know, too, Werner von Braun, he didn't just work for NASA, but NASA. Excuse me, I always, you probably used to it by now. You like, he's always says NASA. Told you every time I always say NASA, I'm always thinking of Bahamas instead of NASA. Um, he went on to not only be a movie consultant. Check this out. He went on to work with Walt Disney on over 200 animated films. And these films were about human exploration into outer space. He worked very close. Now, I don't know if y'all know about Walt Disney and the Nazis. I don't know if you know about that yet. My children have not been to Disney World. We don't do the Disney World thing. You ain't kidnapping my children, but you know, he worked very closely with Mr. Walt Disney. And we talk about propaganda. So the propaganda that they wanted to push to children at that time through Disney films was the exploration into these different transhumanism areas based on technology and being able to go into outer space and contact aliens and things like that. So a lot of those early Disney films, I'm not talking about the ones from the 90s, 2000, the man was long gone by then. But a lot of the early films that you see, like, oh, they're in outer spaces and the rocket ship and stuff like that, that's who it came from. And Werner's protege worked very closely with Stanley Kubrick, and he helped design the helmets that they wore, for the space suits and stuff. Because if you notice, if you look at like actual helmets that NASA uses, it doesn't look like the helmets in the film. But these were helmets that they designed, and these might have been the real helmets. See, just because we see a certain thing with NASA doesn't mean that that's actually what it is. Because there was one part in the documentary, he's showing the helmet, and there was a little black thing in the back, and he said, "Well, what's that in the back?" He said, "Oh, that's a memory pack." Memory pack. I always found that to be very interesting. What would you need a memory pack for on the back of your helmet? And we're talking in 1966. So you might say, oh, in case you want to put your SD card in your phone. It was none of that. There was no flash memory that was accessible to the public. You know, very similar. We talk about propaganda, right? And I hope you all are following along. Yes, I mean, the real life 1950 ones where they show all those innovations and stuff. Yes, that came from Werner von Braun, the Nazi. That came from the Nazi. Um, you remember the scene where Floyd is speaking to his daughter on the video phone? By the way, that was Kubrick's daughter. By the way, just a little fun fact. The little girl in little ugly little dress and was like, "Hell, Daddy, it's my birthday tomorrow." That was actually Kubrick's real daughter. When they did the promo for the film, Kubrick had included all this technology, and then he really upset the producers because he snatched it out without telling them. He snatched it out of the film. So the way they promoted the film was they promoted the technology of the film. So what they had in the film, I mean, in the promos, you don't see this in the movie. There was a guy, but if you watch the documentary, you'll see a clip with it. There's a guy walking with a briefcase, and inside the briefcase is like this. It's basically a laptop in a briefcase. Basically, it's got a little keyboard, and there's a screen that pops up, and then there's a phone receiver. Some of you young people don't know what that is. It's this thing we used to use to talk on the phone, and it was curved like this, and one part went to your ear, and one part went next to your mouth. Okay, and there's a phone receiver inside the briefcase. And what they were saying was that by the year 2001, people will be able to make video calls. And he was carrying this briefcase around, which was like his phone, which had this remote capability to make video calls, right? And they had other technology they were highlighting, and Kubrick snatched it out. Now, did he snatch it out for the same reason he snatched out the trip to Saturn? That the Saturn cult say, look, man, we ain't gonna tell you again. You gonna stop giving away all of our technology and our secrets. Because remember, like I told you, the scene where they're eating and they're watching the BBC broadcast and they're looking at those things on the table and they look just like tablets. They basically are tablets. There was no such thing as that given to the public at that time because they weren't like built into the table. They were really handheld tablets where they were sitting there eating and watching the broadcast on at the same time in 1968. You see? So 2001 A Space Odyssey, the way they really sold it was because they had all this Nazi technology that was infused into the film. And Kubrick snatched it out, although they left it on in the actual book, right? Propaganda is what we're talking about. So this documentary and this film has taught you, hopefully, how propaganda is handed over, you know, and when you look at Dark Side of the Moon, it's propagating or propagating, excuse me, and pushing an idea, many handheld monoliths. Exactly. Hey, I'll tell you something right now. If you look at the scene of Floyd running in the centrifuge, look closely. At one point, if you look up in the ceiling, you're going to see a monolith. It's right in it. No, I'm sorry, it's in the floor. Sorry, because you know how it flips up upside down. It's in the floor. It's a monolith right in the floor. If you gotta like sometimes I look at things and I put it like on, 0.75 speed or I put it on 0.5 speed, because there'll be little things you miss. You just watch it slow and I'll turn the sound off and I'll just watch it like that, you know. So I saw that. I said, oh, it's a freaking monolith in the floor. Now, I'm sure if I watched the documentary, they'd be like, oh, the film crew just didn't, that was just a hole or something. They didn't finish. Of course, you want to tell me something like that, you know. But the point I'm saying is that they're teaching you how we trick you, how we'll show you something, or you'll witness something that has the potential of affecting your perspective, and then will now destroy. It's like H.G. Wells said, our main job is to destroy your beliefs and then give you new ones. So you may believe, oh yeah, it could be possible this happened. That could be, it could be possible that we live inside of a dome. It could be possible the earth is flat. So what is the first thing I do? I have to make a mockery of what we call, and they call them what? Flat earthers. They don't even call them people who believe the earth is flat. They're not people anymore. They're flat earthers. So now any type of ridicule that I hurl upon them is perfectly acceptable because they're not people. They're a label. You see? Or if I say, yeah, I don't think we went to the moon. Nah. What am I? Oh, you're just a conspiracy theorist. So when you can create these broad generalizations, you can then, of course, disinvalidate people down to a perspective, and then that's another tool of propaganda. So you destroy my belief by creating a generalization. We go through that all the time as consciously aware people. Oh, you a hotep. If I say peace, or if I'm a vegetarian, or if I say, no, I don't want to go to that concert, I'm not really into that, or I don't want to be around those type of people, or I don't do that for fun, I do this for fun. Or if you come to my house and yeah, it smells like essential oil. Yeah, there's crystals in the windows. Yeah. Oh, you a hotep, you one of them people. So now you can disrespect me and abuse me because you just reduced me to an action and you reduced me to a label. That's a form of propaganda. So right before you get an opportunity to have an idea gestate in your psyche, well, oh, why you have crystals in the window? That's interesting. Before that even happens, the propaganda has already got an answer for that. What do you mean peace? Why don't you just say good afternoon? Why don't you say just good morning? That's what people say. Why you just can't say what people say? You won't even ask that question. You'll label me as something, so we won't even get that far. If I'm looking up at the sky one day and I say, I think I see a ship next to the moon. Look, you can see it. Oh, you one of them. You one of them energy people. You into vibes. Propaganda. You see, so all these terms are provided for us. See, that's what Edward Benet told us. Like We already gave you the terms for the responses. The terms are already there. We just have to propagate it. And what does propagate mean? To expand, to push. Well, Bitcoin is up 8%, huh? Keep going up. We've already given you the language to push and to propagate these ideas into your head. We've pushed it in already. You see, and that's what the film was sharing. Sovereignty says that makes me recall the decode you did on a never-ending story, destroying a specific belief or the imagination. Excuse me. I'm sorry. Let me say it again. I messed up. Destroying a specific belief or the imagination. Right. You see, that's the role of propaganda. So you watch a film like this, and again, I gave you a list. I won't go through all of them, but all of the real people who were in this film, Buzz Aldrin, I mean, Henry Kissinger, Alexander Haig, these are big people. Jeffrey Hoffman, David Scott, actual astronauts, Richard Helms, you know, uh, there's a lot. Jack Torrance, but Jack Torrance is actually from The Shining. Something interesting about The Shining I want to get before I get out of here. A couple little hints in there. First of all, with the Werner von Braun, if you watch Doctor Strangelove, there's a character in there. He's in a wheelchair. He's funny, but he's in a wheelchair. Dr. Werner von Braun had gotten to an accident at one point where he really damaged his legs. That's your hint. But the character is in a wheelchair, and he's a Nazi scientist, right? And he's always trying to do the hail and everything from his chair and whatnot like that. He's supposed to be Werner von Braun, okay? But they don't name him that in the film. But you gotta kind of look at stuff like that. It's important, um, because again, he's a member of the Nazi Party SS, and then he's an aerospace engineer who goes on to create NASA. And a lot of us still don't know what NASA does or why they would get such a sizable budget. Why do we care so much about going up in outer space and we have so many issues here? And why would you bring the scientists over just for that? You would think maybe you'd bring German scientists over, come over to build us some better cars. Still driving around in these crappy Thunderbirds and stuff. Like, come over here and build an American Benz. Build me an American BMW. Build me an American Audi. No, build missiles and send us to outer space. That's what you're over here for. If they hadn't done Operation Paperclip, there would be no space program. They didn't have the intelligence here or the intel that the Germans somehow had access to. Some say they may have gotten it when they went to the North Pole and contacted the people there. Some might say that. Or they got it when they actually did go to the moon. The other thing, too, is the Carl Zeiss lens that was used in this film. That's another critical piece. I spoke to you about the Carl Zeiss lens. There were 6 lenses made at that time. These lenses, these specific Carl Zeiss lenses. There was only 6 of them. Stanley Kubrick bought 3 of them. NASA had 2, and Carl Zeiss kept 1 for himself. There was only 6 in the world. These were like super crazy expensive lenses, and he used these for some of his subsequent movies to create a certain scene and atmosphere. But it was also said that these would have, well, not even said, these were the films that were used for the space landing because of the temperature and the pressure that was supposed to be there in the moon and the look. Because these lenses, they had the capacity to film in very low light. So there were films that, I'm trying to remember the name of the film that Kubrick did, where he basically, he just, not even basically, he filmed by candlelight and natural light. He didn't use any special lights, but he used this particular lens. And this is where he developed his relationship with NASA over this Carl Zeiss lens. But let's go to the Shining for a second. And I'm gonna read this what Lo says, and then we'll go. I found the Russian spaceship explosion to be shifty because I thought that was that bad. Explosion was that bad. I call sabotage. Also, cause the Apollo program also had explosions, but nothing that bad to stop the program. Yeah, I thought about that too. Thought about that too. Yeah, you know. Um, And then we stopped at what, Apollo 15. Apollo 15 was the last mission. The Shining. So it's a good movie for you to check out to see the continuation of this film. Like I tell you, you'll see basically it's not only alchemy, but it's still questions about the space landing. A lot of people will cite the room in this film, the hotel room. If you'll see when you see the movie, if you look at it, The Shining, room 237, right? Originally, it was supposed to be room 217, and Kubrick fought for it to be 237. And some people say the reason he did that because it's 237,000 miles from here to the moon, right? So that's where the number, where you get that famous scene with red rum, right? It was room 237. But possibly, you got to look at the numerology of it. That's always important, like the 12. But it's actually 238,000 miles from here to the moon. You get that in the documentary. And those 238,000 miles, this is what's interesting why they add it this way. It's 238,000 miles, depending on the time of year, obviously, because the moon, it moves around the planet, and at certain times it's closer and certain times it's further away. They measure the distance from the Earth to the moon based on the core. So if you travel from the core of the planet Earth to the core of the moon, it's 238,000 miles. I always found that interesting. Why would you measure? Why would I travel from the core? Who could go to the core? Who traveled from the core of what the heck is in the core of the planet Earth that was able to travel to the core of the moon? So even if you were to use the logic that we would use and have, we would say it's not 238, because from the core of when you properly go from core to core, you're talking about a subtraction of 5 miles. So it would be about 233,000. If we're talking about we're launching closer from the surface, and based on the closest proximity that the moon would be, it equates to about 233,000 miles. But why are you measuring from the core? It makes me think about, is something launching out of the core of the Earth? Is that why we can't go to the North Pole? Because that's actually an entrance and exit is there a station there? That's why we can't go there. And things are launching in and out of the core. And that's why there have been travelers that have spoken about entrances to the core of the planet Earth, Middle Earth, from the North Pole. And they have been debunked and made a mockery of. Is that why you measure the distance from the moon to the Earth from the core? Now, when you say something like this, you know what happens next? If enough people start thinking about it, what happens next? Tyson Neil deGrasse happens next. Next, you'll see him on a video. Well, let me tell you, it's really simple. If you think, do you have anyone have he'll find something he could pick up. Okay, anyone have one of these USB hub? Okay, and someone has these. So think of it like this, and he'll explain it in some way that's wrong, because some of the stuff he says is off, and I'm like so ashamed of him sometimes. Like, no, that's not scientifically accurate. Come on, man. And he was a wrestler in college. Like, come on. They got you like that, But he'll do that. That's who will show up once you start asking questions like that. Well, let me tell you why that's impossible. Let me tell you why that's a joke. You see, they have to make a mockery. He always shows up. Always shows up. Because we'll listen to him. We can relate to him. Because we're the ones who are figuring this thing out. It's like, when they start to riot in the urban communities, so they go send an athlete in to go calm everything down. He's our new athlete. He calms down all that moon talk, all that mothership talk, all that mother plane talk that Elijah Muhammad used to talk about. He talked about that, shoot, from 1934 to 1975. You see, he calms all of that down. all that Nibiru talk. Nibiru? Oh no, let me tell you what that is. Who says you know? Oh, they finally showed up. I was wondering when my little admirers was gonna come through. Let me read this. Hopefully, the moderators, you will clean that up. It looks like y'all moving a little slow tonight, huh? A little slow tonight. So okay, moderators got it. So anyway, let me go back here. Sovereignty, no. Okay, I found the Russians. Okay, we got all that. So was he adjusting based on the surface liftoff? Mm-hmm. You see, was he lifting off from the surface? Right. And Neil deGrasse always laughing. You catching it. You catch. I'm telling you, man. These documentary, these film 2001. He put you on to so much game. There's no wonder. It's no wonder he died right after his last film. Because his last film, he was like, okay, now I taught you about propaganda. Now I'm gonna teach you about secret societies, and I'm gonna get this dude Tom Cruise, the Scientologist. He's who has they around that time the Scientologists had made this big deal with the Saturn death cult. It was like worth millions. A lot of people didn't know about this because a lot of people don't even know about the Saturn death cult. You didn't know that existed. So I'm gonna get this dude and this Australian girl, and we're gonna do this movie Eyes Wide Shut. And one of the most key characters in the movie was the facilitator of the ritual who had the mask on. He's the guy. He's the guy. They don't reveal his identity the whole movie, but if you watch Kubrick's other movies, see, because you remember the ritual is not just about the movie, it's about everything. You're the masked guy in red. That was one of Kubrick's employees. It was one of his employees. And Kubrick used his real name in the newspaper article. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, just to explain it, I do a movie. I have a killer in the movie who wears a mask the entire time. This is my 5th movie, let's say. My 1 through 4 movies, my personal assistant is Donnie Brasco. That's his name. On my 5th movie, I have a killer. I never reveal his name to you, but he likes to kill people in public bathrooms. I come out with a newspaper article in the beginning of the film, and I say, Donnie Brasco is suspected in killing this person in the bathroom. But Donnie Brasco's a real person. He's someone I know who's my assistant. So I'm pulling him, a real person, into the ritual. You got to read the fine print. You got to, I can tell you, the devil's in the details. You got to read the fine print. Jeremiah said he explained the atmosphere, and it seemed like he was talking about the tree of life to me, laughing the whole time. Yeah, I'm telling you this. If your third eye is open and it's blinking like it's supposed to be, you see right through all of this, and it becomes, you'll be laughing too. You'll be like, oh, that's hilarious. Like you really gonna try that? Really? And then the only time I stop laughing is when I see who falls for something. I'm like, oh, y'all fell for this? Come on, man. You notice what's another way that people use for propaganda? It's called transference. You know what transference is? Transference is when I take something that people find credible and I apply it to something else, right? So we do that all the time with like celebrity endorsements. Hey, I'm Shaq. And if you want good car insurance, get the General's car insurance. They'll be right there when you need them. Right? Well, Shaq is good. He's a good guy. I'm going to get the General's car insurance. You see, that's called transference. Sometimes you get fake whatevers. They'll be like, I shouldn't say this, but I'll say it. I'm a descendant of Frederick Douglass. And I think I'm related to Harriet Tubman too. You see? And they transfer the respectability and the authority and the credibility that you may apply to those other figures, and they transfer it to themselves. That's another form of propaganda. You see? So just like you look at Neil DeGrasse Tyson, and yeah, donations, exactly. Run them donations. Mama Oya, and this wind gonna blow, and Mama Oya knock my phone over. Run them donations. I'm a descendant of Frederick Douglass, but you're not, though. The family said you're not. You're lying. That's how you got on. Then you had to change your last name because you had a slave last name. So now you're gonna call yourself by a Nigerian last name. It's all a process of trying to transfer authority and credibility. You see, so if this guy says that he's an astrophysicist, it's got to be correct. It's a transference, you see, which is another form of propaganda. So when you're watching this mockumentary, you know it's a mockumentary, but at the same time, it has all these big name figures in it. So you're like, I know this is a joke, but they wouldn't lie. You see, it starts to play with your head. So yeah, it must. If they're laughing and joking about the moon landing, it must be a joke. I'm stupid for thinking that it was real. So yeah, like I said, man, when Kubrick brilliantly exposed the Saturn death cult and Eyes Wide Shut, and really showed that these cults are made up of elite celebrities, um, business people, and politicians, it one might say it kind of had dire consequences. There may have been some issues with him doing that there, and you know but nonetheless, we can learn from a lot of these things that have happened, and you got to learn how active and pervasive propaganda is in your world. That's what this film was about. It wasn't just about the alchemy of the Star Child and things like that. It wasn't just about sci-fi, because remember, he was working with NASA at this time to get the most accurately, scientifically accurate representation of space travel. But his representation of space travel doesn't look like what we see on the TV when they show us space travel. And the centrifuge that they were inside, someone had already designed years before, and it was a real thing. Why haven't we seen anything like that since? You see? So, and again, when you slow the movies down and look again, you're going to see the Celtic cross on the ships. You're going to see some other symbols. That's not the only one. There's other ones. I just give you that one. I'm not going to tell you. You just got to go look again. All right. So that has been our breakdowns, man, for 2001: A Space Odyssey, Dark Side of the Moon. I didn't even go through it step by step, but you can watch it. I think a lot of you didn't watch it. And then I'm also urging you to watch the making of 2001: A Space Odyssey, because that's when it gets deep, because that's when you see the German. That's when you see the German connection with Stanley Kubrick, as well as well, you won't see the Walt Disney connect. You could find that for yourself, but at this point, everybody pretty much knows about Walt Disney and the Nazis. I mean, that's not really that big of a secret, but they just don't know, yeah, the Hun connection exactly. They just don't know how they connected. But the Nazis, they engineered propaganda, because remember, around that time, the term propaganda was synonymous with Adolf Hitler. It was like the same, they were synonymous with each other. So you come and bring the people over who have mastered this skill of propaganda. You grant them citizenship, 1,600 of them, and you say, okay, now, because remember, the Nazis came in through the children. So now we got Walt Disney here. Well, teach us how to program the children. Okay, we got you. And here we are today. You see, you could go online right now and look up all the sexual propaganda inside of Disney films. Like, it's been happening for so long at this point, it's not mistakes, but they learned these things from Nazi scientists. It wasn't just scientists sitting there with beakers pouring something green into something orange. It was also psychologists and psychiatrists, and social engineers. These were the people who also came over. All right, so that has been our breakdown, and it all leads us to this concept of propaganda that willfully, again, you can make even better use of. Sovereignty says, we'll look at it again for those missed symbols. Give thanks, Chief Yuya. This was extensive. Thank you. Oh, you're more than welcome. You know that. Yeah, man. I hope, and Jeremiah stayed to the end. I don't think you gave me the thing for the light side of the moon, though. That's all right. We'll get you next time. Maybe, or maybe you just wasn't going where I thought you were going with it. Maybe I might have been off on that one. Um, but yeah, man. But thank you for everyone for coming through. Next strong, we got Brother Low breaking down what I don't know. Oh, Brother Low and Mental. I already know it's anime because whenever they get together, it's gonna be you know, some high flying hijinks. So they'll be breaking down. You're more than welcome. Ghost in the Shell. Oh, that Ghost in the Shell. Is it the anime or the live action though? I got to before I give you a thumbs up. Which one is it? Yeah. Um, but yeah, man. So definitely, if you haven't checked all the other breakdowns there's 5. You can go back to the first one. I try to really focus on something different for each one. Like this one, I focus more on the propaganda aspect, and then the other ones it was the alchemical process and things like that. I think it's the anime. I hope it's the anime. Live action sucked. They blew that one. The yeah, that just sucked. I could have did a better job than that. Like you could have gave me like a couple $100, man. I could have did something better than that. Yeah, live action sucked, man. You know, but yeah. Anyway, man. So yeah, you're more than welcome. So after good, you still it's 10:30 at night. Okay, y'all hung in there. So willfully, man. I hope you all are smarter now when it comes to recognizing when propaganda is being used and someone is trying to push an idea into your head and into your children's heads, and most importantly, trying to destroy the ideas of your children, destroy the beliefs of your children, and replace them with something else. Children, a lot of times, they see very sensible things. There's a video I'm getting ready to put up on the Chief Yuya channel. It'll probably be up in about 10-15 minutes. I was going to put it up for this one, but I just didn't get a chance to. I recorded it right before I did this one. And it's dealing with that. Some of the things that children see that we just dismiss because of the agenda that we have active in us. Yeah, you're more than welcome, Brother Mayuba. More than welcome, man. So yeah, man. So hopefully you'll see agenda. Like I said, you go to that card table, you don't see no suckers, you're the sucker. Okay, there's always one. So propaganda is always happening, man. So you have to start with the pushing of your agenda. You have to use information. I didn't even get into the solutions of how to kind of defeat propaganda and stuff like that. But we'll probably do that another time. But look up these names that I shared with you. Werner von Braun. These are important people, and you'll understand some of the ideas that they may have imputed into the American psyche back in the 50s and the 60s, and how it's still present today. All right. So that has been our session, man. Everyone have a wonderful evening. Please be peaceful. Have awesome dreams, and awesome visions. And when you wake up in the dawning, man, you write them joints down. Or if you wake up in the middle of the night before that machine tries to sneak in and take it away from you, you write it down, you own it, and be about your agenda. Don't worry about they, because they and them, they're gonna take care of they and them. But be about your agenda, man, and defeat the propaganda. All right. So we have Shima tomorrow. I don't know who's doing it, but just be there. It doesn't matter. We have Shima tomorrow evening, for our Sabbath. And then, of course, on first day, Sundays, we're on Clubhouse doing it. But we're not just on Clubhouse, too. We're also on the Anu channel on YouTube. We've been broadcasting on both. So, definitely subscribe to all the channels, man. Subscribe to all of them. Anu Life Global, Chief Yuya, Enlightenment Transformation, Anu Nation. I don't know. These people, these Anu people got all these different channels going on. Just follow all of them. It doesn't hurt. It's just a click, you know. But yeah, man, get on to what we're getting on to, man. Enjoy it, enjoy it, enjoy it. All right. So thank you for rocking with me for the month, man. And hopefully it was enjoyable. All right. Y'all bless. Be safe, be well, be loving. All right. Chief Yuya out. Peace, 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 peace.